Good evening and welcome to Conversations with Crumb. This is our second episode with Village of Historian Mr. Dave Crumb. Dave, it's great to have you along for our second podcast.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here. Our topic tonight is the apple business in Hilton and Parma over the years. Apples were sort of everything in Hilton in the heyday. They're still with us, but I thought I'd start at the beginning just to sort of set the stage for our conversation tonight. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Going back into the 1600s, Hilton wasn't even thought of at that time, but up around Geneva, Seneca Indians were being Christianized by Jesuit missionaries from France who would come up through Canada and settle and come down through Lake Ontario. And the Jesuit missionaries were teaching the Senecas agriculture. And part of that was the planting of fruit trees. And over the years, those Native Americans planted orchards along the lake near Geneva and in other places. Something that I found a few years ago in the 2-volume set of Apples of New York was a photograph of the last Indian apple tree, which was near Geneva, near the Geneva, can't think of the name of it. It's their agricultural, I just can't pull it up right now, but it was near that location, and it's in the first introduction of this Apples of New York. It's a giant tree. Those historians who have read into this information may recall General Sullivan's troops coming up through New York at the request of George Washington after the Revolution. The Senecas had sided with the British, so they were not friends of the Americans who had won the war, and they were attacking the early settlers. So Washington wanted them cleared out of the area, and they were moved up to Buffalo area on the Tonawanda Indian Reservation. And in doing this, Sullivan destroyed all these orchards and all their crops. And it was kind of a sad state of affairs, but in war these things happen. And Washington had wanted to make Western New York safe for the new settlers that were coming in from New England, from Maryland, and other places. So that was the beginning of apples in this part of the country. Our climate along Lake Ontario is extremely favorable for the growing of fruit. We have a late spring due to the coldness of Lake Ontario, which works to the advantage of the fruit trees, meaning that we don't get our frosts are still in the ground, and we don't have a lot of heat until towards the end of April. And the value of this is that we don't have freezes that kill the new buds on the apple trees. At the same time, we have a long fall. The lake is heated up over the summer, and our frosts don't come as early as they do further inland. And that keeps the apples crisp and nice for harvesting late into October and possibly even November. Moving into Parma and Hilton, we used to call ourselves the apple capital of the state of New York, but I'm sure other areas did the same thing. There was a tremendous amount of apple productivity all along the shore, from the Niagara River all the way up to the Oswego River, with a great deal of it on the east side of the Genesee in Wayne County and up near Sodus. In 1798, our first settler in Parma, Bezaleel Atchison from Tolland, Connecticut, planted the first apple trees on Hill Road. Bezaleel and his family came in. They started out in Canandaigua, found that the soil there wasn't to their liking, and they moved west across the Genesee River on ice in 1798 and settled in on the Hill Road down in a gully. Very, very hard times for this family, but they survived and they made it. In 1808, another early settler, Peter Buckley Tenney, who was at the time about 10 years old, planted an apple tree in his parents' front yard. That apple tree survived until 1938, which was roughly 130 years. The story was written up in the Hilton record by Elizabeth Keller, Hilton's village historian at the time, and she witnessed the tree and she saw it being taken down. I guess it had died and parts of it were falling, but it was mammoth. She said it took 4 men with their arms connected to get around the trunk of this tree. No picture, to my knowledge, has survived of it, but the story in the Hilton record is there, and that's kind of a icon story or historic story of an apple tree. And the Tenney family were one of the early families to really get into the fruit business, and more will come up on that in a few minutes. In 1848, Nelson Colomer drove a team of horses from Saratoga, New York to Hilton. He checked out the land up here. He liked it. He bought property down on the corner of Curtis Road and Manitou, and the next few months he sent for his wife and children, and they came via canal boat on the Erie Canal and joined him. Unfortunately, the land down there by Braddock Bay didn't work out for them. Too many mosquitoes. Mrs. Colomer got bitten and got malaria. The family sold that property and moved further inland to Colomer Road. And there, at the address of 180 Colomer Road, they began to plant apple trees. It said in Colomer lore that Nelson exchanged a load of hay for 24 young apple trees. There he planted them. His wife said, well, we probably won't see them amount to much, but they'll be there for our boys. And true to her word, they were. She died in 1865 and he died in 1868, but they had 3 sons and a daughter. One of the sons was John B. Colomer, and he bought the home farm. Another son was Luther Colomer. He bought a large farm up on Curtis Road. Many of the listeners might remember that as Joya's. And then another son, William, who had a farm over on the West Town Line Road, and then a daughter, Harriet. John B. Colomer was quite the entrepreneur, and in 1859, he and a neighbor, John Tenney, were noted as planting the first commercial apple orchards on Colomer Road for this part of western New York. Both families began to plant apple trees and manage orchards. The Tenneys really had the head start, but the Colomers probably finished up with a greater amount of trees in the long run. A lot could be said on both families, but for the point of this podcast, I think I'll leave that till a later time. Early settlers coming into the area also discovered the value of fruit trees on their farms. Everybody talked about the very nice climate here for growing fruit, the late frost and the the late frost in the fall and the absence of heat waves in the spring that might be followed by a frost that would kill the apple blossoms. So while they didn't plant huge orchards on their farms, where they had a hilly, well-drained field, they might put in a small crop of 10 or 20 trees. Along with that would be apples, and then they would put peaches in, and plums, cherries, and apricots, any kind of tree that would bear them fruit, and something that they could preserve for the winter. We didn't have Wegmans back in those days. We didn't have grocery stores. They were on their own, and preservation of food, and this is without freezers too, was a big thing. But canning, drying apples, and other methods were quite well followed, and made great food for the winter months. Apples are good for you. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. That was the old saying. And today we also try to follow that, though we have many more food products to kind of distract us. The dry houses. Parma had many dry houses. There's no list that I can give you at this point, but one in particular comes to mind, and that was the Bennett's Dry House on Curtis Road. That was at the corner of Curtis Road and Bennett Road on the northeast corner. I remember it as a youngster. I used to go down and play in the ruins, which were big stone walls. We all thought it was an old fort. Later I learned, though, that it was what remained of the huge dry house complex that C.O. Bennett and his sons had built back around 1890 to dry apples in the area. And what they did was they heated up some of these rooms and dried the apples. Then they peeled them, and then they packaged them. These apples could be easily, water could be added to them, and they could be kind of plumped up in the wintertime for consumption. And they were sent all over the state. Other dry houses were Bob Dyson's. That was down on the Manitou Road. Clarence Tenney also had a dry house. There was a dry house on Lake Avenue right at by the creek. The building still stands. It's now a residence. It's just opposite Dunbar Road. In Hilton, the American Fruit Product evaporator was erected on Gorton Avenue around 1910. And then, around 1906, the Village Fathers and many people in the community donated money to buy land up on Hines Street to attract the H.J. Hines Company. They wanted to come to Hilton, but to show support, the Village Fathers had to provide the land. And then H.J. Hines and Company came to Hilton, and they erected the Hines plant that we see today. It's built of Medina sandstone quarried up in Holly, and it was built within 6 months, I am told. The architect was George Garrison Priestley, who lived up in over in Clarkson on the Lawton Road, and he was an engineer and an architect. Italian masons were brought in from around Rome, New York, to do the job. They were excellent. They got the job done quite quickly, considering the size and stature of that building. School children riding buses over the years have always thought that building was a fort or a castle. They never quite knew what it was. It hasn't been used. The four-story building has been left vacant for probably the last 60 years. The lower building is owned by Omega Tool and Die, and they use that portion of it for their production. The Hilton Coal Storage on Collimer Road. Many people pass that. They know that it was a coal storage for apples. In its heyday, it produced a great amount of, or had a great amount of productivity in handling apples, cherries, and other products. After its useful life in that department ceased, it was sold and used for storage. Today it is sort of in ruins, but I'm told that it has been purchased and will be somewhat restored for use as storage of construction equipment. The thing about that operation was that it stood right next to the Rome Watertown Oswego Railroad, better known as the RW&O, or colloquially, the Hojack. And the Collamer brothers, Eugene and George, were the ones that had that operation developed, and they even had a siding that went right up to the back dock of or the side dock of the cold storage. The trains would just pull off and pull right up, and they could load the apples. They had an ice or a pond out and back where they cut ice in the wintertime for cooling the apples, and also selling to the railroad to put in their coolers to keep the apples cool as they were being transported. Much could be said about that, but in the time element here, we'd have to leave that to another time. Farmers prospered when the railroad fortuitously was laid through Hilton. They were able to conveniently and timely get their products sold and delivered. Before the railroad, you were on your own to get your products to market, and most all of them, all they had were horses and wagons, and it took about as far as you could go was 7 to 10 miles, and there weren't too many markets other than in Rochester. So the railroad was a great boon to the farming community along the lake. Another story is how the railroad happened to come through Hilton instead of where it was originally slated to go, Parma Center. There was a man named Charles Effner in the community, and he saw the value of having the Rome Watertown and Oswego Railroad come through Hilton. We had a great deal of fertile farmland along the lake shore and south of Hilton, and he saw that the farmers could really prosper, and how right he was. Not only the farmers, but the merchants. Hilton became a little boom village after the railroad. That was in 1876. That boom lasted up until about 1976. Then with the automobile being the main mode of transportation, large industries in Monroe County, people began commuting to places like Kodak, Bausch and Lomb, Ritter Fodler, and other Rochester companies, and Hilton became more of a suburb at that time. But that 100 years between 1876 and 1976, while the train was running, it brought the world to Hilton, and Hilton products could be taken to the world. And I don't mean that facetiously. We have a story where applesauce was discovered being sold or being used in Seoul, Korea. During the Korean War, Mr. Hunley, his nickname was Corn Hunley, and he was working in the mess hall. He was in the Army at the time, and he saw these cans going by on a conveyor belt, and he picked one up and looked at it, and it said, Hilton Canning Factory, applesauce. And he just about flipped out being over there in Seoul. It was like a letter from home. He took the label off of that can before he opened it, put it in his pocket, and we have that label in the museum up at Parma Center. Also, there's a story about a shipload of apples in around 1917 going over to England, and it was the ship that it was on was sabotaged by a German U-boat and torpedoed, and the ship went down and sunk along with the whole apple crop of one of our Hilton farmers who unfortunately had no insurance. And because of that, he went bankrupt. A very sad story, but another point to underscore that our apples from Hilton didn't just go to New York City and Buffalo and down south, but they went worldwide. Some of the statistics concerning our apple business. Hilton once boasted the largest 20-ounce apple orchard in the world. That was owned by John B. Colomer, and he had, with the help of his brother-in-law, Willie I. Smith, developed a large, round green apple called the 20-ounce. And he propagated that and put an orchard in of about 100 acres down along the lake in Hamlin on the North Hamlin Road. And everybody talked about it as being the largest 20-ounce apple orchard in the world. Nobody disproved it, so it must have been. There were 2,000 freight cars that left Hilton annually filled with apples. 2,000 freight cars each year. By 1860, Parma was producing 42,000 bushels of apples locally. Now, that's quite a lot. Bennett's Dry House on Curtis Road was considered the largest of its kind in western New York State. Morris Burritt, who is New York's public commissioner, but who also lived on the Burritt Road, took an apple census in 1910 and found that there were 121,952 apple trees in Parma. It's a large number. Parma is a pretty good-sized township and very agricultural. As late as 1958, 380,000 bushels of apples were stored locally, and 160 people were employed at the canning factory to make applesauce to be shipped out worldwide. A bad thing happened in 1934, however. We had a bad freeze. This freeze killed half of the apple trees in the region. A lot of these apple trees by 1934 were quite old and had big trunks. The freeze happened in December. This is before the sap had not returned to the roots in the tree. With a gradual cooling, and as the lake got colder and the area got colder, the sap would get down into the roots and the trees would be safe for no matter what the temperatures. But here we are in December, and whammo, we had some below zero freezing. I believe that it was something like 34 below, which is sort of an unheard of number, but it happened. And the old-timers would say you could hear the crackling and snapping in the night of the apple trees where the sap was freezing and splitting the branches and the trunks. It sounded like fireworks. 42,158 trees were killed. 50,000, however, survived. There was a lot of removal of these trees, and the farmers, in their wisdom, made big piles of the dead trees on the corners of their orchards. And they did this before this freeze. I mean, whenever you remove trees, you didn't just dump the brush. You put it in a strategic spot on the farm on each of the corners of your orchard. Why? Because if you did get a freeze in the spring, an unexpected freeze, and you check which way the wind was blowing, and then you light one of these big brush piles in the night as the temperature began to drop, and that would ward off having the apple blossoms freeze. And it was very carefully done, and I remember seeing it done. And you see big yellow lights in the sky and smoke, but everybody said, well, they're just protecting their orchards from the frost, and it was a good thing because you could lose your whole crop or have your crop badly damaged. Today, the Village of Hilton logo has an apple on it. In 1981, village merchant and entrepreneur Homer Marple conceived the Hilton Apple Festival. This is one of Monroe County's most popular village festivals. It is still going strong in 2023 for its 42nd year. Mr. Marple is no longer with us, but he was a great visionary, and what he envisioned he could make happen, and the Apple Fest was sort of his brainchild, and it has made Hilton a destination place over the years. Apples are very popular. Apples taste good. We all love apple pie, apple strudel, so many different things that you make apples with, and yet it's good for us. And the old timers used to say, take a shot of apple cider vinegar every day and it'll cure what ails you. Not sure about that, but that was before modern medicine, that was one of the things. There's still several active apple orchards in production in Parma. Zarpentine Farms on Burritt Road has been in the Zarpentine and Burritt family and Tabor family for well over 100 years. Their farm has just been put into the Genesee Valley Land Trust. It has a historical marker in front of it, and the reason for that is it's a farm that has been within the same family for well over 100 years and is still productive. They have an apple maze there. They also contribute to making Hilton and Parma a destination place. Birch's on North Avenue continues to operate, and on Curtis Road on the old Luther Colomer and the Joya Farm, there's a new farm family there, the Zieglers, and they are growing apples in a more modern method where the apple trees are smaller and they are trained to grow on wires so that there's a main lane going between two sets of trees, and you can mechanically pick the apples on this. This has just been in progress for the last 10 or 15 years, and those apple trees are now becoming productive. And it's very interesting to watch. There's nothing like springtime in Hilton with the apples. They're all in blossom, and it's a sight to behold. It only lasts for a week or two, but it's a very beautiful sight. 40 years ago, wherever you looked, you would see apple trees in blossom. Today you have to look for the orchards, but they are there, and really a beautiful sight. And the same in the fall when the apples are out. The red apples on the trees. That's why we celebrate our festival with an apple festival here in Hilton. In the old days, apple harvest was celebrated. Everyone participated. Men, women, children, owners, neighbors, visitors. It was a time everyone looked forward to. It was a happy time. And in the old photographs that we have of these operations, everyone sort of dressed for the occasion. Men were wearing coats and hats. The women were kind of dressed up in warm clothes, but they all looked very robust, and they had their baskets. They were climbing ladders, and really look forward to these occasions. There are many happy memories and have been associated with Hilton's Apple business, and the Apple Festival in October at the Village Community Center each year is always looked forward to by not only people in the village or the town, but people all over Monroe County and other neighboring towns and villages. I think that pretty well concludes the Apple business for this podcast.
Well, Dave, that was fascinating. I think I took 4 pages of notes. I got names of Hilton people all over the place that start making me make more of a connection to the village of Hilton and the Apple Festival business. When I was in college, and I would say, well, kids would come from Long Island. They'd say, where are you from? And I would say, Rochester. And they were like, okay. And I said, well, really, I'm from Hilton. And they would ask me, well, what's Hilton known for? And I would say, well, we got a great carnival, and we got a really great Apple business. And now that I have you on audio, it's just great history, and I really think there's more enrichment that we can get from just what you told us so far. So
Well, thank you, Mike. There are a lot of spin-offs on some of these things that we've talked about. How do you dry apples? The Colomer family, the Tenney family, the Hojack Railroad. All of these things contributed to Hilton's success between 1876 and 1976. Just about everything that was in Hilton's development in those days spins off of the arrival of that Rome, Watertown, and Oswego Railroad. And that will be another podcast in the future.
absolutely. And well, I think this is a good ending point, and you just gave some good starting points for some future podcasts. But I'd like to thank Village of Historian Dave Crumb for joining me today for our second podcast.
Thank you very much.
And
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
And this has been Mike Heise, signing off.